I was on a road trip across the states to meet up with my family and a couple of friends on the West Coast. On the way there, I booked a cabin to stay at just for the night. Plan was to only be there for 10 to 12 hours. Basically just eat dinner, shower, and sleep. Then head back onto the road first thing in the morning. When I arrived, I'd been on the road for 9 hours already and was very tired. The cabin was a lot more isolated than I thought, though. It could have just looked that way because it was in the middle of the night and in the woods, but it definitely wasn't what I expected. I think I was expecting it to be part of a whole row or cluster of other cabins that people also rented out, but it wasn't. It just sat alone. I parked in the gravel in front of the cabin and headed inside. Oddly, the front door didn't match the rest of the cabin. It wasn't an issue by any means, but it was just very noticeable, and I thought it was a weird decision. It was a modern, heavy door, while the rest of the cabin was all wooden and old. Anyway, this cabin was just a single room, with a bed, kitchenette, couch, and TV all crammed into the small space. It had a very old-timey feel. I wasted no time getting dinner ready, eating, and then getting ready for bed. I was pretty tired, so I passed out really fast. But I think only an hour or so after I'd fallen asleep, I woke up. Not to a noise, but a feeling. I know it sounds crazy, but when I woke up, I just felt really uneasy for some reason. I sat up and just listened for a moment to make sure it wasn't anything I heard, but the cabin was silent. Still unsure, I peeked out the window next to me. I didn't expect to see anything, but when I looked out, I could immediately see something moving in the woods. It took me a few seconds to really tell what it was, but by the way the figure moved, I was pretty sure it was a person. What the hell were they doing out here? I'm not exaggerating when I say it was pitch black outside. The forest was dense, and no light from the moon or stars was coming down. I could only watch them for 30 seconds before they were completely out of view. I stayed by the window for a bit, waiting to see if they appeared again, but after 5 minutes, I laid back down. Tomorrow was going to be a long day of driving. I tried to close my eyes and drift back into sleep, but I was probably laying there for 40 minutes, still eyes closed and not being able to sleep, before I heard something outside the cabin. There wasn't enough time to even comprehend what it was before a knock came at the door. Again, this whole cabin was one room, so the door they were knocking on was literally just a couple feet from me, and there was nowhere else to hide or exit from. I jumped up from the bed. My head was spinning. I don't think I'd been that scared in my entire life. Then, a man's voice yelled from the other side of the door, "Hey, open up. Open the door now. I know you're in there. Open the fucking door." His voice was aggressive and angry, and only had me even more horrified. I didn't know whether to respond or what to do. They clearly knew I was inside. I mean, even my car was out front, practically giving it away. I got my phone and dialed 911. It took a minute for the call to go through. I think my phone had no service, so it was trying to use data, and it was just struggling. But when it got through, I got online with an operator who said an officer was on the way. The guy outside the cabin was still hitting the door. Honestly, I couldn't tell if he was just banging on the door or actively trying to break the door down. He never got in, though. After a minute or two, I heard him leave the porch. Then I heard glass shattering, which I knew was from my car. When cops pulled up, he wasn't there. There were some clear indicators that he ran back into the woods, but obviously they weren't just going to run in there and look for him, at least not in the middle of the night. But when the owner of the cabin was contacted, things got a little weird. He admitted that a previous resident had a similar incident, but they never contacted the police about it. Apparently, someone came knocking on the door in the middle of the night and was yelling at them. The next morning, after the ones staying there had left, the owner found the door bashed open, like broken into with a sledgehammer or something. I guess the owner thought if he reported it, word would get out and nobody would want to stay there. So he kept it on the low and just replaced the door with something heavier and more sturdy. Really weird. I don't know how to feel about that. End of the day though, I was just glad to get out of there and go see my family and friends. Maybe I could have done more about it, but I just wanted it to be over with. What that man came to the cabin to do will be something I continue to think about likely for the rest of my life. I worked at a gas station from 2018 through 2020. Not the best job I've had, but it worked for the time being. As far as my shifts, I always tried to get my manager to schedule me for the overnights. I knew it'd be less work and I'd be alone. The first year, I did mostly regular shifts though, but on my second year, he finally started giving me overnights. I will say, although I was right about it being less work and nice to be alone, I didn't take into account just how boring it'd get. The business really slowed down past 10 p.m. Like, nearly nobody came through, and if they did, it was just to get gas outside, so I'm not kidding when I say I didn't have to do anything. I found myself doing whatever possible just to pass the time. Sometimes I'd even go outside and walk around the parking lot, completely out of boredom. Anyway, this night I assumed was gonna be like every other. By 12 a.m., I was looking for something to keep my mind busy. I thought emptying the trash by the gas pumps would be a good distraction, at least for a few minutes. I grabbed some trash bags and headed out there, emptying a couple of garbage cans and heading around to the back of the building to toss them in the dumpster. When I tossed them in, I nearly had a heart attack. There was a guy standing right behind it. I didn't notice him when I was walking up. "Oh, sorry. I didn't see you there," I said nervously, mostly just embarrassed that I got jump scared and not yet fully processing it. The man didn't respond and just kind of stared at me with this weird, emotionless gaze. As I walked back to the front, I realized how weird it actually was that he was behind the building near the dumpsters. He didn't look homeless or anything, so what could he possibly be doing back there? I looked back a few times as I emptied the other garbage cans, then a little more cautiously went back to throw them out. But the man was gone. Didn't see him anywhere. I tossed out the rest of the trash and went back inside. Maybe it was irresponsible of me, but I really didn't think it was all that concerning. There were other shops around the block open late, and even a nearby bar that sometimes people walk to and from and pass by the gas station. I thought that's probably where he came from, and I just saw him at a weird timing while he was taking a shortcut behind the building. Or maybe he was just a drunk being a drunk. I pulled my phone out and checked the time. 12:15. I leaned on the counter and tried to think of something else to do, but my train of thought was interrupted when I saw something in the corner of my eye. I looked over toward the doorway that went into the back room. I swear I saw something move. I didn't immediately get scared because I very quickly assumed it was just me being tired and seeing things, but with nothing to do, I thought I might as well check on it. I began walking over, sort of leaning my head to the right to look around the corner of the doorway as I approached. The lights were off in that room, but right when I got into the doorway, I saw someone standing really close to the wall, like they were hiding and waiting for me to come in. As soon as I saw them and stopped, they came around the corner. It was that same man from behind the building, but he had the most disturbing expression on his face that I have yet to even get the image out of my head. It was a mix of rage and insanity. I barely had the chance to see the knife in his hand before he swung it toward me. My reactions took over and I jumped backward, hitting one of the shelves behind me before booking it out of the store. I ran pretty far away, then called 911. As I was standing out on the street, I couldn't really see whether the guy left the store or not, as it was pretty foggy out that night. Of course, though, the man was gone when cops arrived. My best guess is that he was actually a crazy homeless man, despite his looks, and probably hoping to end me and take whatever he needed from the store. He also could have just been absolutely insane and had an urge to do something horrible that night without ever being provoked. Who really knows? I quit a while after that and never heard anything about it since. I was chilling at home this night, just like any other. There really wasn't anything interesting going on. I was just enjoying my time sitting on the couch and watching TV, staying up late to take advantage of the long weekend. I guess I should mention I lived alone in a typical suburban home. I had a pretty nasty breakup a few months prior, and after it was all said and done, I decided to keep the house rather than sell it. But that's a story for another day. It was around 10 or 11 p.m., and I was sipping on a nice cold can of Budweiser when a sound came from out of nowhere. It sounded like a knock, but not from the front door, which still wouldn't have made sense at this time of night, but it was from behind me, like in the back of the house. I left the TV running and walked around to see what it was. To me, it sounded like something tapping on a window, but that had to not be right, so I assumed it was maybe something falling over. I walked through the hall and peeked my head into the family room, and then the kitchen, but there was nothing to see anywhere, so I just went back to the couch. I might be a little less cautious than the average person, because I really thought nothing of it. Like, I didn't care whatever it was, because it had to be nothing important. I stayed on the couch for a while, still just drinking and chilling, before I heard it again. Tapping on a window. After hearing it that second time, I was almost certain that that's what it was. I got up and went around to the other rooms again. This time, though, something was immediately off. One of the windows in the back of the room was open, and so was the basement door. If it were one or the other, I probably could have thought my way out of believing someone broke in, but both suddenly being open, and with the sounds I'd been hearing, I knew it was too much to be nothing. Now, I know how stupid of a decision it was, but at the time, I felt like I had to check the basement. I think the alcohol gave me some poor judgment, and to be honest, I was a pretty big guy with a big ego, so I wasn't about to run out of my house and let someone else get away scot-free. I looked down the dark and empty staircase for a moment. Somehow, there wasn't any sound coming from down there. I took a few steps down the creaky stairs and flipped on the dim lighting. Since moving in, I don't think I'd ever gone into the basement at night. I just never had a reason to. It was unfinished and kinda useless, so when I got to the bottom, I was caught off guard by just how little I could see. The lights barely did anything. There were dark corners all over that anyone could be hiding in, and that's when the fear really started kicking in. I sobered up real fast, and I got the hell out of that basement. I closed the door behind me and moved the nearest large piece of furniture to block it. I called the police, and by some odd chance, an officer happened to be just on the other side of the neighborhood. He got there quick, coming in with a flashlight and his gun drawn as he searched the basement. Didn't take him but 10 seconds to find a man crouched down in the dark corner right next to the stairs. I must have been just 3 or 4 feet away from him when I was down there. The man was armed, too, with a large kitchen knife. Thankfully, he didn't fight the cop though, and went down easy. As far as why he broke in, it beats me. The man said he was just trying to shelter from the elements, which made no sense because it was pretty decent weather outside, and from what they could find, the man wasn't even homeless. He had an apartment downtown and a regular job. That was probably the closest I'd been to having my life cut short, and it's really disturbing how completely out of nowhere it would have happened, and for no known reason. Guess this is a lesson to never let your guard down too far, even on a seemingly uneventful night. This had to be only 5 or 6 weeks ago. It was spring and raining quite a bit, so I spent a lot of my time at home, inside and away from the rain. I had some papers to get done for work, so this night I was hanging out at my desk in the living room, working on my laptop. I was really tired, and even with coffee next to me, it didn't keep my eyes from feeling heavy. Every couple of minutes, I'd lean back in my chair, stretch, and rub my eyes to refresh myself before getting back to work. However, one of the times that I leaned back, I saw something next to me. I nearly jolted out of my chair. There was a face outside the window, directly across the room. Even more creepy, the guy was staring at me and didn't even flinch when I saw him. He was just standing there, face pressed into the window, smiling at me. I stood up and stared back at him, still in shock of seeing him there. Before I even said anything, they moved away from the window. I wasn't exactly a professional in being stared at through a window, so I didn't know what to do about it. I'd never even seen the guy before in my entire life. Eventually, I walked up and looked out, but whoever that was gone. I could see their footprints in the mud, going through my yard and into the trees. I backed up and kind of just stood in the middle of the room for a moment to collect myself. I thought maybe if I just made sure they were gone, then I'd be able to continue my night without freaking out too much. I quickly threw on my rain jacket and opened the front door, turning on the outdoor lights and stepping outside. It wasn't raining too bad, so I could see decently well. I walked over to the window he was standing under. It was kind of weird seeing the inside of my house from there. I could see my desk I was sitting at, and the whole room, perfectly lit up. It was just a little unsettling seeing it from that perspective, knowing someone was just staring at me from here. It gave me chills. I looked back down at the footprints in the mud and decided to follow them for a little bit. Replaying all of this now, I know this was dumb. I don't know what I was thinking. I followed the prints just up to where the trees started getting denser before I noticed something. They were facing toward my house. This was where they came from, which meant there wasn't any signs of them leaving. My heart rate picked up as I was figuring this all out. I turned around, now getting really scared and wanting to run back inside. But when I faced the window again, a person was now standing inside my home, looking out at me. I didn't skip a beat, running down to the road and banging on my neighbor's door. They woke up and let me in, calling the police for me. No one was there when they got there, but they found the back door was forced open, which likely happened just as I went outside to look for them. Had I stayed inside and been face to face with that sick man, I don't even